Welcome to Not Suitable for Democracy, the show about the problems facing American democracy and sometimes how to solve them with organizing. I'm your host, Nick, and on today's episode, we're talking about a range of topics from endorsement headlines from East Coast to West Coast, what's happening with Hassan Piker, and what's going on with Trump world. As you may have heard, Pam Bondi was fired. So, more about that, and how do all these topics connect? Well, you're about to find out right here on Not Suitable for Democracy. Before we get into it, make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to give us a like and a comment, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Now, back to the show. Starting with endorsements. Now, what's happening in California's 11th Congressional District? You may have heard, but Saikat Chakrabarti is running for Nancy Pelosi's seat in Congress. Yes, there are 3 candidates running, 3 Democrats, and Saikat is potentially the frontrunner. Now, currently, he was not endorsed by the California Democratic Party. That went to Scott Wiener, who isn't exactly the best on Gaza and Israel. He's actually been wavering on those answers in the most recent forums. It's actually happened twice now. So with that said, Saikat, he has been the strong progressive voice in that Democratic primary. Now, the latest endorsement that Saikat received, or should I say earned, was from the Justice Democrats. Yes, the same organization, Justice Democrats, that endorsed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez back in 2018 when she was the only Justice Democrat to win her Democratic primary all those years ago. Now, for those who may not know, Saikat Chakrabarti was formerly AOC's chief of staff. So yes, Saikat has the insider knowledge and experience not only working as chief of staff, but being up close to politics in the United States government. So to see that he has not only he's very well versed on the issues, especially progressive policy that he's been championing. And if you take a quick look at his website, you'll see very clearly he's focused on affordability, he's focused on progressive issues, right? And he's really looking to bring that level of just progressive policy expertise that he's actually worked on, right? Like he knows the Green New Deal because he needed AOC. It was working with AOC on that. But then also Medicare for All, right? And how is he going to make life more affordable in San Francisco? Now, he knows he has an uphill battle because the fact that California's 11th district is one of the wealthiest in the country. And the fact that it is really trying to put together a coalition of liberals who want change, progressives who are really looking to move the needle on policy, but also just bring out maybe the non-traditional primary voters, right? Folks that usually sit out the elections, trying to bring them into the fold with taxing the rich, making sure the billionaires pay their fair share, right? And all these great policies that are really going to not only shift the conversation to the left, but the Democratic Party in a new direction. So excited to see that now Saikat has the backing from Justice Democrats who have been, they've had some solid Democratic primary wins over the course of the past 8 years. Now, their most recent candidates, for instance, you may have heard Kat Abu-Ghazaleh. She unfortunately did not win her Democratic primary in Illinois' 9th Congressional District. However, she was only down by a few thousand votes and within 3 percentage points of the winner. And the fact that she did have over $1.18 million spent against her from AIPAC. And the fact that she came that close shows me that Justice Democrats knows how to pick them, especially with strong progressive candidates. And Saikat is absolutely the strong progressive in the field. So if anyone's out in California, tell your friends, tell your family, anyone who's in the 11th Congressional District in California, please vote for Saikat Chakrabarti, where the primary is coming up in June. We'll make sure to give you updates and more to come right here on Not Suitable for Democracy. Now, switching gears back to the East Coast, we have 2 exciting endorsements from even stronger progressives, okay? So what I mean by that is that, number 1, let's talk about Graham Platner. And who's to come? Well, we also have an endorsement who Bernie Sanders recently endorsed here in Queens, New York. So let's focus on Graham Platner to start. Now, we know that Bernie Sanders had endorsed Graham Platner early on when he launched his campaign back in 2025. So since then, Graham Platner has done a phenomenal job organizing grassroots energy. Democratic voters, independent voters, and Republican voters, people who feel disenfranchised and are so sick of the leadership in Maine. Now, that being said, we know right now he's running for the United States Senate, and people are not happy with Susan Collins, right? Although her biggest, let's say, one of her things that's kept her in office for so long is that she has been able to deliver, a good chunk of money to the district, right? To Maine. So the fact that she's able to make those wins, as long as you pay the right people, she kept them happy. However, what we're also finding is that even though she's, bringing in the money, she's also wreaking havoc on our country. She's voted for Pam Bondi and a lot of Trump's cabinet members who have since been fired or made horrible decisions. She's also voted to support the SAVE Act, and she's also voted to support the Big Beautiful Bill, which wound up wreaking havoc with the ICE immigration raids all across the country. So Susan Collins has got to go. Now, the great thing about Graham Platner is that not only is he really taking this seriously, right? He's on the ground talking to voters about issues, about everything that are on their minds, right? Whether it's healthcare, whether it's trans rights, whether it's even like immigration, he is meeting them where they're at in this moment. And the thing I love most about Graham Platner is that he speaks with a level of urgency, clarity, and the sense of that he is an outsider. He does not shy away from the fact that he was a veteran, he was an oyster farmer, right? And the fact that, yes, he actually did say some questionable, problematic things in the past. But one thing that Democrats are reckoning with in this Democratic primary for the United States Senate in Maine is that when do we actually focus on the policy and when do we actually forgive? If the progressive movement is about empathizing and compassion and really giving second chances, right? When is Graham Platner going to get that second chance from the centrists and the liberals who really do want these leftist policies that Graham is so focused on running? And especially with a working class background, he's been able to connect with so many voters. And how do we know that? Well, if you look at all the polls, Graham Platner has been crushing it. He's not only crushing Susan Collins by 20%, but also his challenger, the Democratic governor of Maine, Janet Mills. So the fact that Graham Platner is up 30 points against a current governor. Now, Janet Mills, she's been attorney general in Maine for many years. She's been the governor of Maine for many years. So the fact that she has not only a long record, a history of politics, but also really good name recognition, and she's down, says so much about how people are feeling about this Senate primary. Now, the other thing, too, just for some context, right? We know that Janet Mills has been trying to, throw the kitchen sink, let's say, at Graham Platner with these problematic comments, trying to bring up, the dirty baggage. And, she's allowed to do that, right? As any, Republicans, they all do that to Democrats all the time. But the point is, it's this isn't really working with the electorate. Janet Mills has been at town halls and people have pushed back and said, hey, Janet Mills, I'm offended by these ads. You're wasting all of our time on this, brouhaha, when essentially at the end of the day, we need to be focused on a working class focused agenda, making Maine more affordable for residents, but also how are we going to fight back against not just Trump, but the oligarchs, right? The millionaires and billionaires, people who are actually taking valuable resources from Maine and really, wasting everyone's time and money. And Janet Mills doesn't have necessarily a strong message to counter that. She's really just been running on hey, I'm the governor and I'm a Democrat, vote for me. Whereas Graham, he's been being the moment. And the best part, Graham Platner was just endorsed this week by the Working Families Party. Yes, the Working Families Party, the same exact party that endorsed Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Zohran Mamdani, both when they've been running for their respective elections. So Zohran Mamdani won the Working Families Party, and when you could vote for him in the general election, he was on the Democratic Party line and the Working Families Party line. This whole idea that, we only have to vote Democratic is, as much as people want to adhere to the Democratic Party line, just know that when we have other options, it brings more people into the fold, especially when it's supporting good policy. So the fact that Working Families Party is also progressive leaning, and hey, to be frank, they do lean into identity politics, right? Definitely supporting women, people of color, which is all admirable. So the fact now that Graham Platner the working class candidate and the strongest progressive in this Democratic primary for Senate for Maine. He has now won a coveted endorsement, which should have Janet Mills running scared. The fact that the Working Families Party is trying to branch out in more of its like progressive pockets around the country, right? It's building its base here in New York, and we've seen the effect it's had on the electorate with Zohran Mamdani winning and folks like AOC championing their progressive platform. So now bringing that energy to Maine in a Democratic primary for United States Senate, this would be really cool to see the Working Families Party send Graham Platner to the Senate from Maine. So with that said, please keep an eye out on latest polls and what's to come, because now that Graham Platner is building this very important momentum with the Working Families Party, in addition to being, very involved in the Democratic, let's say, electorate, he has a really good chance to win. And I really hope if anyone lives in Maine, anyone out there, please make sure you are registered to vote, and that you can vote in the Democratic primary for Maine, which is coming up. I think it's in June. Yes, the Democratic primary is in June for Maine. So stay informed, get ready, because voting for Graham Platner will help move our whole entire country forward. Now, last but not least, we have one more special endorsement news coming from Queens, New York. So, Claire Valdez, she is running for Congress in New York's 7th Congressional District. Now, the great thing about Claire is that she's been doing incredible work organizing within her union, fighting for labor rights, and even as a state assembly member, really challenging power in the state assembly. So it's been phenomenal to see, as a self-avowed democratic socialist, not only did she rise up with warm popularity as a state assembly member, but now she's taking the next step as a potential member of Congress. So she threw her hat into the ring for the Democratic primary for New York's 7th Congressional District. And now this district is one of the most progressive in New York, but also it does range between two boroughs, between Queens, like the southern part of Western Queens, like Sunnyside, but then also you got Brooklyn. So with Queens and Brooklyn really trying to, galvanize like a very progressive electorate, right? This is heating up to be a very contentious primary. And the reason being is that we have two great progressive candidates. You have Democratic Socialist Claire Valdez, but then you also have Antonio Reynoso, who is the Brooklyn Borough president. And he's been a city council member. He's worked his time in the, New York politics. So the idea that he's been around not only for a long time with political experience, but he's also from the district, right? Like, he's New York native, grew up from Brooklyn. Whereas Claire, she's technically is from Texas originally, lived there for a little bit, but she's made her roots now here in New York. So between like someone who wasn't born here versus someone who was, grew up here, right? There's one differentiation. How does that play into how they perceive the issues in the district and how they like really immerse themselves in what people in the district are want them to fight for? And how is their handle on the issues? Well, we know that Claire Valdez will be an amazing ally to Mayor Mamdani here in New York City, but also to the Democratic Socialist movement, not only in New York State, but around the country. So if we can send another Democratic Socialist to Congress, that would be huge. Now, that is to say that while Claire has racked up her own slew of endorsements, Antonio Reynoso has done well for himself, even getting the endorsement from Nydia Velázquez, who was the first Puerto Rican woman elected to Congress right here from New York's 7th Congressional District. Now, she's been in Congress for decades, and she's been a progressive voice for years. Now, even when she ran her seat, she took down an entrenched incumbent. So just the fact that like Nydia has really thrown her weight behind Antonio, that sends a signal, not only to really, let's say putting a spotlight on candidates who have, done the work in the district, who are from the district, right? But also progressive voices. So Nydia threw her hat down and said, as much as she supports Zohran Mamdani when he was running for mayor, she does support Antonio Reynoso, sending him to Congress, especially to carry on her legacy. Now, I will say, I think, to full disclosure, I've been supporting Claire Valdez since the day she announced, because I think that she, A, is the stronger candidate in terms of policy, B, I think she will do a phenomenal job in Congress, really fighting the establishment in a way that I believe Antonio might not be able to do at the same level because, he's been an elected official having to work with the more moderate wing of the party. So while he has been an effective legislator, especially as a Brooklyn borough president, I just believe that Valdez will be the one to challenge power more so than Antonio Reynoso. So with that said, while Nidia Velázquez has a strong voice and strong sway in the district, the latest endorsement that Claire Valdez earned is from Senator Bernie Sanders. Yes, the, let's say, godfather, whatever you want to call it, of democratic socialism on the national level in this country. Bernie Sanders has thrown his hat into the ring for New York's 7th Congressional District, where I believe this might even be, the fact that it's in Brooklyn, Bernie's from Brooklyn, so he is going to have a stake in this congressional primary. So to see Bernie throw his hat into the ring, it just doubles down my support for Claire because she has, the heart and she has the fire that I think a lot of New Yorkers really resonate with. And the fact that she will be a phenomenal ally with Mayor Mamdani and his policies, it's golden. I have no qualms with Claire Valdez. The fact that the New York Democratic primary is on June 23rd, okay, so we have some time to campaign, get out the vote, organize, and make sure that you are registered to vote. And make sure that your voter registration is updated. So we have until June 23rd. Make sure that you are ready to go because we need to get Claire Valdez in Congress. So now, across all three candidates, Saikat Chakrabarti in California's 11th Congressional District, and United States Senate Democratic primary with Graham Platner out in Maine, and most recently Claire Valdez in New York's 7th Congressional District running for Congress. We know that these three candidates are strong progressive voices who are Democratic Socialist leaning or Democratic Socialists themselves. And lastly, they are willing to buck the party leadership. We know that all three are not going to support whether it's Chuck Schumer or Hakeem Jeffries, who are both polling very low among the Democratic electorate and the base. So if you want new leadership and people who are going to actually stand up to Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, you got to vote for Saikat Chakrabarti in California's 11th Congressional District, Graham Platner for U.S. Senate Dem primary in Maine, and Claire Valdez for New York's 7th Congressional District. Now, not only are they all strong progressive voices willing to buck the party leadership, but consider Claire Valdez and Saikat Chakrabarti. Now, part of the conversation that's been that some people have been really reviewing their backgrounds for, right, is where they're originally from. Now, Saikat hasn't lived in the district his whole life because he did spend time in Washington, and then Claire, like I mentioned, was originally from Texas. So now I think the Democratic Party has to really grapple, or at least the voters have to grapple with, do they want to focus only on someone who has roots in the district for a long, long time, or do they want someone who understands the issues but's also willing to push forward in terms of policy and vision? So this is going to be key about how we're seeing different races play out. And if the winds or the political winds are telling me anything, if you watched how James Tellerico won the Senate Democratic primary out in Texas, number one, he built a coalition between not only progressives, but also disenfranchised voters, specifically progressive Democrats and independents, right? Especially with Latino voters. And between sewing the needle across Democratic issues, but also progressive issues, right? He spoke about taxing the rich. He spoke about challenging the billionaires. He spoke about really leading with love and loving thy neighbor. So instead of treating folks as exclusionary like Republicans and what Trump does, especially with immigrants, right? He made his campaign message very broad, but also able to invite them into the fold. Now, Saikat has been running on affordability, Claire has been running on democratic socialism, and Graham Platner has also been focused on working class issues and affordability, but also challenging the leadership. So between all three of these progressive candidates, right, we know Graham Platner has the strongest ties to Maine, but how will this now resonate with Shoykat's background with his policies and Claire Valdez's background and her policies. So at the end of the day, if they all have strong policies running on very similar platforms, I would hope that the electorate in each of their respective districts really listen to what they have to say and trust that they're coming in with good intentions. And lastly, just know that they will be in good hands if they want to see change and they want to see something new and better than what the Democratic Party is presenting right now. So last but not least, make sure that if you live in California's 11th, New York 7, or out in Maine, make sure to support Saikat Chakrabarti, Graham Platner, and Claire Valdez because that is suitable for democracy.